Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 38 of my Industrial Revolution 3 playthrough. In this episode, we are going to upgrade our circuit production, as well as make more trees from carbon dioxide. Enjoy. And as far as technologies go, we're basically caught up with all of the stuff that we have researched. We're about at the point where we want to research something new. But before that, we should probably try to upgrade a part of the factory that's a little weak. Our green circuit build is quite old, and it's done in the style of back in the day when we still had steam pipes. So we probably could make this a lot better, especially considering we now can process it with these laser assemblers. And I really hope the assembler centipede here works when it's running at full speed. I mean, definitely the belt isn't full, but that's because this machine at the bottom isn't running. So the only way this belt stays full is if all the machines are going. So it's a little weird like that, but I think it will work. But if it doesn't, we can just rebuild it. But anyway, we need more circuits. And right now, this setup can only do about 6 or so. And if we do everything together, it's basically using one yellow belt's worth of glass. And that's basically how much this makes. So this is also a very old part of our factory that we need to upgrade. In fact, all of this stone coming up here is kind of awkward because it's being delivered all the way down here. But working on glass is something that's a little interesting because now we have the max tier of crushers that use diamonds. So potentially this build can change. Plus, it was built in this size back in the day of us having steam pipes. So if we didn't have to deal with steam pipes, we could potentially do it differently. And we could potentially upgrade to blast furnaces, which do work on alloys, but it specifically does steel and silicon. It does not do glass. So kind of what we want to check here is to look for, are there any better ways of making glass that we're about to do? And not really. It's just made from glass alloy, and glass alloy comes from an electric alloy furnace. So it doesn't look like we're going to be making glass in any better ways than this. So we're basically at max tech now, with the exception of modules, which we potentially could plan for because although we don't have them yet, we're actually quite close to having blue circuits, which will then let us have tier 3 modules. So we might want to plan this build around tier 3 modules if it would help. Well, first thing is instead of 15 a second, how about let's do 60 a second, which will match our other builds for other resources. And of course, things have to change here. We are now using the electric alloy furnace, and by default, let's just use efficiency modules in there. And now we have 2 tiers higher of crushers with the efficiencies. And again. So what are we looking at here? Well, let's try to walk this back a second to get the more or less exact ratio. That it would be 1 crusher into 2. It's not exact, but it's pretty close, so we can just do direct insert like we did before. And then 10 alloy furnaces. And that is different than what we did up here, where it's 1 into 2 into 4. So we're going to need to get 10 of them connected. So let's see what we can do. Oh, are we actually caught up here? It looks like it. Well, that's awesome. All the crushing is now complete. And because of our lack of sulfur, we're just not making any concrete. Fortunately, these are going to take forever to handcraft. But I don't really want to automate things like diamond cutters because that would require sending diamonds all over the place. Especially because we're not actually making these steel items on our new bus. I kind of want to wait until we just have robots for all of this stuff. Guess it depends on how big this build ends up being. Well, one thing we can do is use an assembler for this. And it's been a while. But let's use a transfer plate. We do still occasionally make use of these logistics. Then we have a transfer plate here. We can just kind of use our inventory to mule it over. And robots will actually deliver the unused items to our inventory, which will then allow us to mule even more. So we kind of can just stand here if we need to. So yeah, it's a little slow, but we can stand here and get our cutters pretty easily, which will then allow us to make these much faster, because now we have everything else in our inventory. So that's a balanced way of handling this without having to bus everything. Transferring these around with robots is like the perfect application of them, and doing it with airships, although possible, is just kind of time consuming. So let's see what kind of build we can do. I'm guessing the maximum number of alloy furnaces we can do for this is going to be 8. So like before, the input will be here, and then they'll be shot into here, and then essentially we've got 4 slots on each side we potentially could use, like this. Just however makes the most sense, that squishes things the most. So it would probably be this. And luckily now we don't require fuel or anything, which makes these furnaces a little easier to use. And then these go on the other side as well. And that does leave a little slot in the middle to send in a belt from somewhere. And that gets us 8. And we could, of course, put another one right here to get the full 10, but it wouldn't be very square. Although I think we could make it slightly more square if we did this and just put that on the end. And then move that one over there. I did that instead. So then if we placed another one, it would be like this. So it's about as squished as it can get. And we could also put some speed modules in here. In fact, just the one would do it, but it would consume, just for this set of machines, 2.5 megawatts compared to 0.75. So I'm thinking I would rather do the extra space method here. And actually, another thing we can do is just have the belt like go to the side like this and have all these setups side by side by side. That would work, but I like the idea of sandwiching them in here, so we'll see how it works. All right, well, let's try to get rid of some flashing here. Is this a job for substations? I guess it depends. There actually isn't room for them. However, there should be space between these machines. Almost. Let's just move those inserters. It looks a little better. They're not crossing over the pole. And these ones would be covered if they were just not in the middle like this. So let's push them over there. And we're probably going to need to do side switching on this. Got to set the recipes too. So if we crank this up to 52.5, the numbers don't quite line up, unfortunately. Seems like there was some rounding going on there. But it doesn't necessarily have to be the even 60, just as long as it's reasonably close here. So essentially we would want to build 4 of these, so could we without it messing too much up? Yeah, looks like it. It would fit in just fine. Alright, well for now, let's pick it up. And I guess robots are going to help, but all of these items will be immediately used again. I kind of want to tear out the old setup so we can reuse the items. Even though it's kind of a bad idea to tear things out before you've got everything replaced. But it'll be fine. And this is where the glass needs to eventually make it. And let's find our new spot. Somewhere out here where there's a little bit of space. And it's a nice setup that fits cleanly in here. I have noticed we're getting fairly high on carbon dioxide here, which makes sense. We can hold 4 times as much of it now, but nonetheless, it is going to overload. So when it does, we need to get rid of it, and I'm curious how fast a vent goes at 1.25, and these also do 1.25, so I wonder if they're directly linked. That would be really cool if they were. So let's do 4 vents and 4 heat exchangers. So a simple overflow valve here, pushing it off to the side somewhere, and then 4 of these to turn it into gas form again, and then vent it away. Yeah, it absolutely seems like they are directly linked. And that's just kind of a cool little tiny setup you can do in order to vent the liquids. And it seems like it is more than enough to do so. Okay, this should get it all correctly in there. Okay. Let's see how it all works. Hopefully every inserter is correctly adjusted. So it goes in the middle one. It splits out. They're all basically turning green. It's kind of taking a second for everything to fill out here, but it seems like it is. So that is a lot of glass. And it's going to be delightfully zigzaggy in here. Can downgrade this belt to yellow. So everything should be back to normal now. Still might have belt shortages here, which we'll want to mess with, but at least we've got the glass. But we still need to upgrade our circuit production. And again, because we don't have steam pipes anymore, we probably can make this a lot smaller and change the design a bit. But we have a new recipe. Now we can use nitrogen just to make it twice as fast. So let's upgrade to about 15 circuits a second. We've already got something here, but we might as well trash it because we're actually changing the recipe to 15. And that's only 2.5 assemblers. So they are quite fast. They will get direct inserted with copper wire, which can just be out of one small assembler each. And then also the thermionic tubes, which must be in a regular assembler. Because we need so many more of them, we might want to think how we're going to do it. But that's a lot of them to put on one belt, so we still may want to try to do some kind of direct insertion if possible. But we would also need the nitrogen, which it shares in its own setup. Now we've got it down to the base components again. It's probably going to be completely different than that. Well, first let's see what we can do with these. And actually, this is kind of the wrong module complement because we can make them faster. Although in this situation, it doesn't really help. I mean, we could really crank them up to make it direct insertion. And that would make it a 2-to-1 ratio with these other assemblers. So in this situation, we probably should. And the speed modules, the first tier of them are pretty terrible, which it's 50% extra energy consumption for only a little bit of speed. And then it's 60% energy consumption for 30 speed, but we're not that far away from the third tier, which is 50% speed for only 70% energy consumption. So it's barely costing you any more energy for a lot more speed by the time you get to those. But we're approaching the end game here where having ideal setups is more about their shape than it is their energy consumption. Because if we did it this way, it would be so much easier. Because then we could essentially do this, and actually all of those inserters will be too slow. But unfortunately, we're going to have to do something silly like this, just so we can get the full output. I'm not sure in this case if the blue belt's actually going to help any, but let's just put it in there to be sure. And that is everything necessary for the tubes. And we need a total of 5 of them, but they're going to be direct inserting into this laser assembler. And this is going to be so dense, I don't even think we need to worry about putting machines down here, because we could do something kind of like this and really smash them in there, but we only need 3 of them, so it's not really going to be that big a deal. And this one machine is going to need an incredible amount of these tubes here, technically 15 a second, which is not going to happen with these inserters. And since we are at speed limitations here, even though we're not quite ready yet, let's get these stack inserters going. It's a chrome item, and they work as you would expect. And of course, there are stack upgrades, but let's let that go. And I guess I kind of haven't covered the differences between the blue and the yellow inserters, at least with balance, that the yellow inserter does 3 items a second, and the blue one is twice as much. And the yellow has 17.9 kilowatts of consumption, while the blue is 49.5. So the blue is not more energy efficient than the yellows. So if you can use yellows, you should, even if you have to use like a bunch of them. But of course, convenience matters in the end. And we'd rather have a nice clean build than something that's crazy. Well, that stack inserter will certainly get the job done here. And then this kind of requires more of the same. It might be more compact technically in this setup to do something like this, but let's just do this so it will be tileable later. And let's see here. We can kind of move this stuff around a little bit to do this. Say it's just glass, and awesome, the research is done there. And each one of these is going to require 5 glass a second, which could be done with something like that. So do we have a setup that we can copy? Well, they certainly smash in. So this is going to have about 2.5 times the output of that up there, and it's much smaller. So for now, I suppose we can just handcraft these inserters. We're currently not picking up the items that we need, specifically the chromed rods. And actually, could we automate those? It needs the motors. And actually, we are making the motors right here. So that's good news. And we'll have the red circuits up here as well. So we can make them. Cool. As far as numbers, we should put the item that we need a ton of on the closer belt. And in fact, that's so many, we'll probably actually want to have stack inserters. And with no upgrades, their speed isn't much more than the blue, so we should probably get those going now. And that's the easy stuff. Now rods and pistons. Okay. They're getting faster. It's not quite enough yet, but it's getting there. And now we can grab our inserters. And as far as stack inserters go, they use an incredible amount of electricity. Whether it's more efficient or not kind of depends on how far you've upgraded them. But I'm going to get the impression here that when they're fully upgraded, they're actually pretty efficient. So we'll actually do the math when we've got all these upgrades done. Let's see, we're not making any more sulfur, but we have acid gas. Ah, interesting. Something must have gotten placed in there incorrectly. We are kind of short on red circuits too. I didn't want to rebuild that, but maybe we should. I think we were more short on green circuits than we were red ones. So how in the world did that get in here? It probably placed it here. That still counts as being connected. That's what I'm guessing, that an airship came through and it had some stone in hand, and then it got placed in there. Which means we might actually be overloaded on stone, specifically right here. And not quite, although we are getting there. So the stack inserters got upgraded again. Yeah, we probably need more red circuits, but I really don't want to upgrade this. It would significantly change the balance of things. I mean, we could just copy it, that's the other thing, and not even worry about doing it in this way. But now we've got inserters in here, and they're 20 per second, which means it's about 7 kilowatts per item moved. And by comparison, this one does 3. It's more like 6 kilowatts per item moved. But something tells me with this last upgrade, it's actually going to become the most efficient inserter. However, a huge difference is that the minimum energy consumption while they're just sitting here, the idle energy, is a kilowatt compared to half of that for blue and a little bit less for yellow. So both the blues and the yellows still have a point that when your factory has thousands of inserters, that energy consumption does start to add up after a while. We do also need to pull some of these tubes off for use elsewhere. And we really haven't done provisions for that, but nonetheless, it's actually still possible. Let's just use red belts here. We can't hit every machine, but we can do half of them. And we don't really need enough of these for it to really matter. Other than the circuits, it just kind of goes into this other random stuff. Let's do that to switch the sides, just to help it out a little bit. And inserters are done, and they're 24 items a second. We do need to process the nitrogen, and we can use a similar pump setup like this. So that's pretty close. Factory robots are helping. Space it out a little bit to leave room for the belts. And there we go. Nitrogen is ready to go. So basically we just need to get resources in here. And it's stacked glass and stacked copper on both sides. Well, now we're at the point where we can pull this out. It's going to mess everything up for a little while. We need more space. I mean, it's working, and actually getting it hooked up here is rather annoying. But we can clean these belts up a little bit. So it'd be something like that. It's gonna take a second for it to completely fill out, but it should. And what's the actual output of these? Well, they don't need to run at full speed, but we're actually going to need to have 2 of these long-handed inserters. Which, there we go. It seems to be managing. We have upgraded our green circuit output. And hopefully that will keep up with what we need. And we'll see how the red circuits hold out. But what else can we do here? A big one is the final tier of forestries, which unlocks a new building. It's the same speed as the last one, and now it uses chromed plates and nanoglass. And it has 2 pipe connections, because this thing is fairly complicated. First, we need to make ammonia from nitrogen and hydrogen, and notably that ammonia is not something that we can compress into a liquid form. And we turn that ammonia into fertilizer, and then that creates a recipe where if we do fertilizer and all of that carbon dioxide that we're holding on to, we can make 1 wood every 6 seconds in addition to 30 oxygen. So we're turning the carbon dioxide into oxygen. And of course, it also gives you the recipes for all those trees that we don't need to worry about. And if we look at what we have now, the recipe is 12 seconds per wood. So this is going to double the output of our forestries, because otherwise their speed and pollution is the same. And this is a great way of generating oxygen and also getting rid of that carbon dioxide, because currently our setup actually does not make any oxygen. In order to get oxygen, we would essentially have to do air separation, and that would also give us a lot of nitrogen, but we're holding on to this nitrogen that we're not using for anything, so we might as well put it to use. I mean, we are sending it across our factory for the purposes of our setups that do use it, like these, but they really only borrow the nitrogen. We just put the pipe there in order to seed them. They don't actually need to consume it. But this will consume the nitrogen, and also it makes it so we don't have to keep dumping the carbon dioxide and putting a little pollution in the air. And it's cool that the temperatures are here for all of the liquids, where it's negative 35 Celsius for the carbon dioxide, negative 270 for helium, 150 for natural gas, and 250 for nitrogen. Not that carbon dioxide is that much pollution, but nonetheless, it would be better to save it if we could. And if we look at carbon dioxide, actually the only thing that this goes into is making wood. And we can liquefy it, but the liquid doesn't go into anything. So this is the one use of carbon dioxide, so we should probably try to use it. It will generate a ton of oxygen, and then the oxygen, if we have too much, we can just dump it because it's clean. And as far as hydrogen, it actually goes into various things. So hydrogen is something we would want to store in liquid form if we could. Right now it doesn't really matter because we're just going to turn it into ammonia, but later on, if we wanted to do these steel alloys or hydrogen fuel cells, we would certainly be sending it in liquid form. Even though that's not particularly realistic, it's one thing to send liquid carbon dioxide across a factory, but liquid hydrogen, that's a little different, but we'll roll with it here. And essentially the maximum output of all of these is 700, and assuming all of these work at the same rate, each one does 50. So we would need to have a set of 14 cryo plants for this, which is substantial, so we should probably just take the space down here to do it. So 4, 8, and actually this is so much, we might want to double it up here. The army has arrived. Alright, that's all done. Somehow I got these misaligned. I don't know how I managed that. There we go. So the hydrogen will come in on each side because we have 700 a second in total. It's not crazy, but it would be good to try to keep them separate. So we put pipes on each side and a pump here to empty all of that out. But that's a interesting look for hydrogen. And its temperature is negative 250. Fortunately, it's just not really going to fit in here. And because we need to get the gas in here, how about we do this instead? Because it's always going to try to fill up. And then we have this long one, which would come in here if there was room. And surprisingly, it's actually fitting. Somehow, there's just a huge buffer in there. Well, cool. Well, there we go. We'll switch this over to liquid hydrogen, and we've got it on our list now. And this is going to be a big buffer, but it's hooked up, and now we're probably going to see the natural gas completely disappear. It's one of those rare situations where that actually does happen. Anything else we want to research while we're here? Probably. We now have a different tier of furnace, because these final furnaces aren't necessarily direct upgrades from each other. They more do things in a different way. The blast furnace is a chrome item and requires a ton of those silicon carbide bricks. They are very hot, very fast, requiring coke as a fuel. They specialize in iron, copper, steel, and silicon. So similar to how the gas furnaces work, these run on coke instead of electricity. And note that they have a very high crafting speed of 5, and also a 20% bonus to productivity, and a lot of pollution. And we'll do the math later, but they are very fast. And of course you get recipes for each item you want to make. And the way that it works is you have to put compressed air in, and then it turns it into carbon dioxide. So this is another thing that's going to be making carbon dioxide. So we really need to start consuming it. At least it would be better than just wasting it. So you get 3 recipes for copper, 3 recipes for iron, and whether or not you want to do those, it's kind of up to you, especially because we would have to rebuild our setups for that. But the important ones are steel and silicon, and if you remember, the recipes for steel and silicon already used coke. But now, you no longer have to put coke in the recipe, you put coke in to fire the blast furnace itself, which is a slightly different way of doing it. So we'll need to do the math on all of these to see if they're worth it, but for now, that is definitely something that we would want to do. And electrum and the metal foam gets us into blue circuits, which then pushes us down the chain. So instead of that, how about let's do some lasers? Coherent beams of light that can cut, weld, or kill. Very much so. This will be a consumer of helium, and it requires a gold mirror plate, which is the electroplating that you can do with gold. We haven't made that solution yet, but that is how you would make it. And we'll have access to lots of cool stuff here. Most immediately relevant would probably be robots. So we have the distractor, an intermediate type of robot. Stays on the deployed position to shoot and distract robots. And it is getting quite expensive to make these. And of course it is a laser robot, and they don't follow you around, so it has limits in that capacity, but nonetheless, that is something cool. And then we have lots of upgrades. And you thought having 20 robots was sufficient. Well, we can keep this going. So we can add another 10 with this research, another 10 with that one, and another 10 with that one. So we're going to be up to having 50 robots at a time, and that's probably plenty of research for now. Let's follow this number down and make sure when it gets to 6,000 it turns on without dropping to 5 first. It's kind of surprising how quickly it's disappearing, but it's probably going into furnaces and things. I keep having to remember we have a lot of furnaces in this factory, so we need to do some calculations here. That currently we have 24 tree farms, and of course we'll probably want more, just depends on how fast this consumes the carbon dioxide. And also, the tree farms are kind of close to our pollution generators to where sometimes the trees actually get harmed by them. They recover, but nonetheless, we kind of need to be careful. But to find out, let's do a recipe that makes wood, and interestingly, it no longer requires water. So we don't have to pipe any water here anymore. But it is going to require essentially 3 pipes of resources, where the fertilizer and carbon dioxide go in and then the oxygen comes out. So it's going to be a lot of pipes. And we have 24 of them. They're set correctly. And that's 5 wood a second. And we're going to need to have this carbon dioxide, which would be in liquid form. We probably should calculate that. And I guess we can't put this recipe here, or at least it's going to be one of the locked ones, because we have to do the warming right there. So that will require 6 exchangers, but that does tell us that we essentially need 1 exchanger per group. And in fact, it's 1 exchanger exactly per group. But now we have an idea of what we have here, and it kind of just depends on where all of the carbon dioxide is being produced. Well, it would come from making sulfur, and all of those combined would make just 37.5, and then all of the hydrogen ones would make more. So actually, this might be a sufficient amount, at least for our current output, but of course, when we're doing blast furnaces, we're going to need more. But we'll also have an enormous buffer when it's in liquid form. So that should help us out a bit. But for now, I think just having these existing farms seems like a pretty good idea. But we want to keep in mind we might need a lot more fertilizer than this for future expansions. But that'll be 6 plants, and that's not very many plants, so we certainly could do more. And then we'll need the ammonia from just 2 plants, and they need their own iron pellets. And finally, that's nitrogen and hydrogen, and it would need 110 hydrogen, and I think we were doing like 700 here. So we have plenty of hydrogen for this, and nitrogen we're just going to have to take from our supply here, and we might very much be limited by that. But we can also buff it up a bit, and this will create a ton of oxygen and a ton of wood. And that's more free power, and free power is a good thing. Let's make it triple the required size. Let's grab like 12 of these. And it is kind of funny how we're putting it in liquid form and then just doing it in gas form again, but it works. So there it goes. And as far as ammonia goes, It only goes into making fertilizer, and of course you can vent it if you want to. And that's a 100% pollution recipe. Does definitely look like red circuits is falling behind. I mean, we could upgrade this simply by using the faster machines. Seems like we definitely need to have faster inserters in here, and we'll use the stacks. So the limiting factor seems to be these ones right here, and we can upgrade them with one speed module in there to make them a little faster. And now it's silicon that's falling behind, so we've probably cranked it up as much as we're going to get away with here. One thing though that stack inserters aren't very good at is picking up from belts to machines. They're much better when it goes machine to machine. Although they are definitely faster, the blue inserters aren't that much behind. So there are use cases for every inserter type, but it's basically going as fast as it can. Certainly using up all of our silicon. Alright, since we did 3 times as many plants, let's go for 18 with fertilizer. And the setup is similar to this one. So let's grab this part, give it some decent spaces. I guess we'll just do 10 on each side. Take the entire setup and rotate it the other way. Actually, we could make this a lot smaller. And to save some space, we can do another tank. Just kind of in here. On the green wire because it's another chemical. And all of that research is done. Guess we might as well continue, because we've kind of got a lot in front of us. Burn big holes in things. Pew pew. Now we can do laser turrets. And the steel turret frames, which are just steel items. But from there, that gives us lots and lots of upgrades we can do. Let's do the electric arc turret. Slows things down, but it doesn't cause any damage. That ought to be interesting to see. It looks like it's basically like a plasma turret. So we'll do that. And then that gives us the personal defense versions, where we have the discharge defense if we want to use that, and the personal arc turret if we want to use that. We'll probably need a better armor first, but that gets that covered, and now we have lots and lots of upgrades to do to lasers. And there it goes. More yummy green smoke. But the amount of fertilizer is rapidly increasing. So now we just need a bunch of advanced forestries. It requires a ton of chromed plates, but this does mean we don't need these old ones anymore. Okay, we're definitely at the point now where we need to use up this high-octane fuel, and that's 250 per second, and who knows how many generators that is. They do consume up to 2 per second, so 221. Not sure if it's going to let us do this. Oh, it looks like it does. We need 166 of them. Well, how many do we just have? 110, that's actually quite a lot. Well, that would be 112 if we did this. So we definitely want these to be somewhere convenient, but also don't want to cover anything too important up. Let's see, let's put it like right there. And we'll connect this. We definitely want this to have its own logic, so we'll disconnect this from everything else. So in it goes. High octane fuel has to be more than 20,000, and it wants to run. So there it goes. But like before, we want to have special logic for this. And our numbers may want to be different, because high octane fuel is probably our highest priority now, simply because we won't have very much of it compared to everything else, so we'd want to burn it first. So let's set this down from, instead of 50, it's 25. And it goes up to 45. And the new 75% is going to be the high octane fuel. So now it's 75%. And it takes it up to 95. And it's trying to turn on, which means... there we go. An incredible amount of high octane power. Until it runs out. Which it's actually decreasing quite quickly. And I guess since we're here, we can clear up the last little bits of junk in here. And unfortunately, these things are getting super damaged by pollution. That's not great. What's it look like here? Oh, that explains it. We could put some pollution cleaners in here. But these will also eventually catch up. Guess it just depends. Is everything else fine? Seems like it. These are just really close. I kind of want to just stop this for now. Let pollution clear out. Might as well get rid of all these poles and everything. I think these are the last little bits of copper pipe that were stuck in our factory, so it's nice to see them gone. That's really killing the trees fast. Of course, we just shut it off, so they're not going to be regrowing anymore. And we can fill in any water as well. Give the trees something to grow on. Well, here's essentially what we're building. But it's going to be a lot different. So in that sense, we might just want to build something completely new. If we build them 2 spaces away, that will leave room for what we need. Strange how these don't connect right here. Really seems like they should. Well, they do when that's there. I wonder if that's just a graphical glitch. I don't know. It makes me kind of worried. So because of that, let's pick it up by 1 space. And put that in there just to make sure. This does mean, however, that the wood can be loaded up right in the middle. And we're still not going to be producing it fast enough to need anything other than a yellow belt. So there's going to be 3 fluids coming in here. And we don't even really have enough room to do this here. See, because of all this stuff here, it might just make sense to have a substation. And I think that gets it hooked up. Of course, the position of all the belts and stuff could move later. Let's see the tile grid so we can place this more or less perfectly. It doesn't really matter, but it's basically like this or like this. Let's just put it to the right. And actually, luckily, that lines the belt up perfectly. And since we're here, so we just put it in there. Line it up. We might as well fix this. Because zigzags are dumb. Although it does look like I misaligned these slightly. The pollution is going down very, very slowly here. Those poor trees. We'll definitely need to have some pollution mitigation items right in here to protect this, which we have options for. We just haven't built them yet. Oh, these poles are so much better now. See, these ones are being hurt too. So it's like we need a wall of pollution cleaning right around here. But it's kind of hard to tell when they're not even on right now, so it's not going to show us the full picture until all of these are running. So we need to get a ton of chemicals up here. Well, the easy way would probably be to come through here and just jump over things. Let's just shut down research altogether. Let the factory kind of clean itself up. And this is going to be 3 new resources we're going to have to send up here. So here's our 3 pipes we need to send up. And we'll just wait until something blocks us. Aw, man. Well, wait, if we go right there, we can make it. Awesome. And I guess we'll just go straight in. And then the fun part of hooking this up, and basically everything is going to start running. So, oh, that's noisy. That's this thing just warning that trees are dying, but you can see how much faster it's making wood now, like really fast. And we're starting to get a little bit of liquid oxygen in the network. So if all these are hooked up correctly, then every single one should be going. Man, these trees are almost completely dead now. That's not very good. We definitely need to protect this farm. Not so sure about this one. That one might survive. So if all of the trees are good, then all of these ones should be going. And they are. And we're making tons of oxygen. So this does mean that when carbon dioxide runs out, you just don't make trees anymore. And I'm willing to make that sacrifice. And we might have to upgrade this setup because we're going to have a lot of wood coming in now. Alright, so we need to try to protect these trees a little bit. Because, man, they are dying fast. So the way that we can do that is with air purifiers. They work similar to the air compressor, except it does not provide you with any compressed air. It just immediately vents it, but that saves you the effort of having to vent it manually. And they're not very powerful, where one of these will consume 30 pollution a minute. And as an example, one of our setups here produces 8.1 per second, or in other words, about 500 per minute. So to fully counteract it, we would need to have a ton of them. But we'll try to do a few per chunk and see what we can get. No, the carbon dioxide's actually running out a lot faster than I was expecting it to. So we might not be producing trees for very long. But we need to make an item we haven't before. The air filter, which is just graphite and gold foil. Graphite is already coming in here. And gold is available up here, so we should be able to do both of those pretty easily. It's not a very fast machine, but also we're just not going to need very much of it. So how much do we want to make? Who knows? Actually, we should probably fill it completely up. So potentially up to 2,000. Because this is a perfect application for an airship. Because it can go all around the factory delivering these air filters that we just don't need very fast. And let's deliver some stuff. So we make an airship. And also looking at the pollution on how it's kind of spilling in there. Maybe we can just cover the 3 sides right here, which seems to be where most of the pollution's coming in. So as long as it's right inside the chunk, that's fine. And actually, let's do it right next to each other because we can. And there will be a filter belt coming through. And these are essentially always going to run, which is a little dangerous because it's constantly consuming resources while it goes. But it would be like this, and actually, let's have the belts going the other way. Because the airship station can be right here. And it barely fits in there, but it does. And we can put these anywhere in the factory that we need to protect something. And we could try to turn them on and off as required. And in fact, this might actually be a use for the forestry combinator. And the way this works is we'll need to have some constant combinators. Of course, we're going to run out of carbon dioxide before we are able to fully test this. But it is what it is. So the way this works is we can throw some combinators in here. And it tells us the total number of trees that we have. And in this case, it's 15. So we kind of need to put these in every area. And we'll hook them up to deciders. And we need to calculate for what's the emergency condition. Probably trees being less than, let's say 45 or 90%. If so, green. And we'll hook these all up together. So everything's connected. All the trees are very hurt right now. So we're getting 4 on signals when we really only needed 1. So this goes between all of the inserters. And this logic is simply, if there's green circle, you can swing, which will then enable the air cleaners. Otherwise, the belt will stay filled up. Okay, let's get this chain started. Where we plop it. Let's get it at least minimally loaded with fuel. And there it goes. It's kind of excessive for this one little trip, but I'm guessing we're going to have a lot of these filters all over the place because we're going to be needing to compress air. So having this one airship going all over the factory will make a little bit more sense. Anyway, it comes in here. And there goes the filters. And you can see that the pollution is actually very rapidly decreasing right here. Unfortunately, there's no carbon dioxide to actually see the effects of this. However, we can see that the pollution in this chunk is being dramatically reduced. So we at least want to get this clean enough to where these trees are At least not dying anymore. I'm guessing they don't grow unless the forestry is actually on and producing wood. That'd be really cool if they grew even when you don't have any input fuel. I guess we'll see once we get this cleaned up enough. I mean, it's down to 36 pollution. Unfortunately, that's still not enough. But when you look at the pollution here, our little wall is making a huge difference in protecting this. Well, I am happy to report that the trees seem to be regrowing themselves, even though they're not making any wood. So that's great. It means that you can switch everything over to working on carbon dioxide and not have to worry about all your trees dying off. Unfortunately, these farms, although at the start of the game they were pretty far away, now they're really close to the pollution clouds. But a lot of this pollution, though, is simply coming from our power generation. Because if we look at pollution over the past 10 hours, it spikes because they turn on and off, but you can see the iron boilers are where all of the power is going, and you can look at this number here, where the vast majority of it is those boilers. So when we switch to running on nuclear, then that's going to be a lot less of that. It's kind of funny that even though we have a lot of petrochem generators, they're really not contributing all that much to pollution. And everything's basically caught up now. Just kind of have to let everything cool down. I did build another mine here for sour gas. So now we're almost fully utilizing all of our resources. There's just this crude oil here and the tiny little patch right there. And of course the stuff we would mine like copper and iron. We've still got a couple patches within the walls here. And that's the end of this episode. On the next one, we are going to upgrade to blast furnaces and start making blue circuits. Thanks for watching. I'll see you later.